I used to think I was content. Not happy, content. There's a difference. Happiness is laughter over dinner, spontaneous kisses on rainy mornings, whispered confessions in the dark. Contentment is empty coffee cups, a silent house, and a husband who barely looks up from his laptop to say goodbye. My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 35, married, suburban homeowner, childless by choice, or maybe by circumstance. My husband, Ethan, is a senior consultant for a management firm, which essentially means he lives for numbers and dies for deadlines. And I decorate the home, maintain the illusion, and pretend his absence doesn't hollow me out. When we renovated our basement last spring, Ethan suggested we rent it out for extra income. We barely use it, he said, eyes glued to a quarterly report. Might as well make it pay for itself. I nodded. He didn't see my smile. I didn't really want the money. What I wanted, what I needed was change, disruption. Something, anything, to puncture the dull rhythm of my days. 2 weeks later, he arrived. Derek Moore was 24. Young, confident, the kind of man who walked like he owned every room he stepped into, even if it was just our foyer. He had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, a single black suitcase in the other, and a slow smile that made something shift beneath my skin. "Hi, I'm Derek. Thanks for the place," he said, offering his hand. His grip was warm, steady. I noticed the tattoos along his forearm, clean lines, deliberate ink. He smelled faintly of musk and peppermint. His eyes lingered a second too long on mine, but not in a way that felt inappropriate. It felt aware. "Welcome," I replied, my voice too soft. Ethan shook his hand with the detached politeness of a landlord. "Rules are simple. No loud music, no guests overnight. Rent's due the first of every month. Let us know if anything breaks." Derek nodded, already glancing toward the staircase to the basement. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't smile too much. He didn't try to charm me. But something about his presence filled the house in a way Ethan's hadn't in years. I found myself listening for his footsteps in the mornings. He worked evenings, sometimes returning past midnight. I'd hear the door click softly, hear him shuffle down the stairs, and imagine what his life looked like outside our walls. One afternoon, I passed him in the hallway. He was shirtless, sweat on his chest, earbuds in. I pretended to be surprised. "Oh, sorry," I said. "No worries. Just back from the gym." His torso glistened slightly, muscles shifting with every breath. I looked away too quickly. Or maybe not quickly enough. "Looks like someone's dedicated," I said, feigning casualness. "Helps clear the head," he replied. "Besides, health is wealth, right?" I smiled. He smiled back. That night, I told Ethan about it just to see if he'd react. "Derek seems disciplined," I said over dinner. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. "Let's just hope he pays on time." I felt invisible again. A few days later, I went down to the basement with a set of clean towels, an excuse, really. Derek opened the door in nothing but gym shorts. His skin was damp, and steam curled behind him from the running shower. "Oh, sorry, I thought you might need," I started. "Thanks," he said, taking them with one hand. "You always think ahead." The compliment was simple, but it stayed with me. And then there was the night I heard sounds. Moaning. Soft at first, then louder, rhythmic, undeniable. The walls were thin. My face burned with shame, and something else I didn't want to name. I sat up in bed alone. Ethan was on a business trip in Phoenix. I lay there, covers twisted, pulse heavy, and imagined what Derek looked like beneath whoever made him moan like that. Or perhaps he was alone. Perhaps it was his toy. A thought that curled through me like smoke. The next morning, I couldn't meet his eyes. "Ava," he said as we passed in the kitchen. I poured coffee with shaking hands. "You good?" I turned to him. His expression was unreadable. Just like his voice, calm, controlled. Like he knew.
"Yes."
"Just tired," I said. "Didn't sleep well."
"Yeah."
"Same," he murmured, then sipped from his bottle and walked away. That week, I found myself dressing differently, less frumpy, more attentive. Lip gloss. Perfume I hadn't worn in months. Nothing overt. Just enough to see if he noticed.
He did.
I caught his eyes drifting. Just briefly. But when they did, they didn't apologize. One evening, Ethan and I were watching television in the living room, he on his phone, me pretending to care about the news. Derek passed by the window outside, shirtless, headphones in, his muscles taut with effort as he worked out in the fading light. I stared. Ethan didn't notice. He never did. And that was when I admitted something to myself. I wanted Derek. Not just physically, though that want was unbearable. I wanted the way he saw me, the way his gaze lingered like a question, not an obligation. I wanted to feel the ache of anticipation again. To be seen, desired, consumed. To be remembered. I told myself it was just a fantasy. A harmless indulgence. That I'd never act on it. But fantasies have a way of growing roots when fed. And I had been watering this one, day by day, glance by glance. It was only a matter of time before it bloomed into something I couldn't control. There's a moment when a fantasy stops being harmless, when it steps out of the shadows and asks you to follow. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday. It had been raining since noon. The kind of persistent drizzle that blurred the windows and made everything feel slower, softer, secret. Ethan was out of town again, this time in Chicago. Some quarterly review, some important client dinner. I didn't ask for details. He didn't offer any. By evening, the power went out. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the silent stove, the blank microwave, the lifeless glow of my phone screen. Then I heard footsteps, firm, deliberate, ascending from the basement. "You all right up here?" Derek's voice reached me before he did. He emerged from the staircase, holding a flashlight that cast sharp shadows across his chest. He wore a black hoodie, unzipped just enough to show the white tank beneath, damp at the collarbone. "I'm fine," I replied, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Just wasn't expecting a blackout." "I've got candles downstairs," he offered. "And music. Battery speaker. It's not much, but better than sitting in the dark." I hesitated. He noticed. "No pressure," he added, voice easy. "Just thought you might want some company." I followed him. His basement apartment was surprisingly cozy. Minimalist, clean, smelling faintly of sandalwood, and something else, something earthy. The candles flickered along the counter. A playlist hummed low in the background, sultry, soulful, the kind of music that slips under the skin. I took a seat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed carefully. He handed me a glass of wine, already poured, as if he'd known I'd say yes. "To surviving modern infrastructure," he said with a smirk, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "Cheers." For a while we just talked. Or rather, I talked and he listened in a way Ethan never had. I told him about my past, about how Ethan and I met in college, about how things were different then, how we'd stay up all night arguing about art and politics, how he used to surprise me with handwritten notes in my purse. I told Derek how slowly, almost imperceptibly, all that vanished, replaced by silence, routine, efficiency. "It's like living with a well-dressed stranger," I said, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. He didn't interrupt, just sipped his wine, eyes fixed on me like I was something worth understanding. Then the conversation shifted. "You ever wonder," he asked, setting his glass down, "what your life would have looked like if you made one different choice?" I stared at him. The way the candlelight kissed his jawline, the subtle tension in his arms, the question in his eyes. "All the time," I whispered. There was silence. Not awkward. Not expectant. Just thick with everything we weren't saying. When I stood to leave, my hand brushed his shoulder. "Thank you," I said, "for the wine. And the conversation." His gaze lowered to where my hand lingered. "You don't have to go," he said, voice low, even. My heart pounded. "I should," I said, but I didn't move. His fingers found my wrist, lightly, tentatively, as if asking permission. When his lips met mine, it wasn't urgent. It was slow, patient, like he'd been waiting for the world to stop before claiming his place in it. I responded before I could think. before reason, morality, or consequence could claw their way in. What began with lips turned to hands, to breathless whispers, to a gravity I couldn't escape. He didn't make love to me. He took me, unapologetically,
Completely. And I let him.
because for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a routine or a duty or a footnote in someone else's ambition. I was Ava.
I was seen.
When I woke, the candles had burned low. Derek lay beside me, asleep, arm draped over my waist. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full of what we'd shared, and everything it meant. I slipped away quietly, each step back up the stairs heavier than the last. In the bathroom mirror, I looked different,
Flushed. Alive.
like someone who had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The next morning, I couldn't walk without remembering. Every movement was a reminder of him, of how his hands had learned every inch of me, of the hunger in his eyes, the weight of his body over mine. It was a kind of soreness I didn't want to heal. But guilt doesn't sleep for long. I avoided him the next few days. Every knock at the door, every footstep on the stairs, made my pulse spike. I busied myself with meaningless chores, folding laundry that didn't need folding, organizing drawers that hadn't been touched in months. Ethan returned Thursday night. He kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. "I missed you," he said absently, setting his briefcase down. I lied. I missed you too. Over dinner, he told me about his meetings. I nodded, smiled, filled his glass, laughed in the right places. I was the wife he remembered, perfectly present, perfectly hollow. But inside me, something had shifted. Derek hadn't just touched my body. He had awoken something I didn't know I'd buried. A need, a hunger, a fire. And though I told myself it had been a one-time thing, a desperate indulgence in a moment of weakness, I knew better. Some things, once tasted, don't leave your mouth so easily. The guilt didn't hit me all at once. It came in ripples, small, almost invisible at first. A skipped glance at dinner. A hesitated touch from Ethan. A growing unease whenever I heard Derek's door open downstairs. But guilt isn't a wall, it's a tide. And soon it was crashing over everything. I tried to go back to how things were. I really did. I made Ethan's favorite meals. I laughed at his dry humor, even when I didn't feel like laughing. I reached for his hand in bed, seeking comfort in a man who'd long stopped noticing when I needed it. But the ghost of what I'd done, the ghost of Derek, was always there. In the way I hesitated before folding laundry, remembering his shirt clenched in my fists. In the way I avoided mirrors, because every reflection was a reminder of what I'd become.
He didn't chase me.
He didn't call, didn't text, didn't find me in the hallway to ask what it meant. He gave me space. And somehow, that made it worse. One Saturday afternoon, a week after that night, I found him in the backyard. He was shirtless, glistening again, pushing a wheelbarrow full of gravel for a project he hadn't told us about. His body moved like a machine, efficient, unapologetic. I watched him from the window, coffee in hand. My pulse quickened without my permission. Then Ethan stepped beside me. "We should have him do the walkway next," he said casually. "Kid's got work ethic." I smiled thinly. "He does." That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan was out cold beside me, arms sprawled across the bed like a border I didn't want to cross. I stared at the ceiling, listening. And then, I heard it. Footsteps. Not loud, not slow. Purposeful. I sat up. My heart was a war drum. Then came the softest knock at the front door. I didn't move at first. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, pulse pounding in my ears. Another knock. I slipped from bed like a ghost, careful not to wake Ethan. Each step down the stairs felt like a betrayal.
Because it was.
When I opened the door, he was there.
Derek.
Black hoodie, hood up, eyes shadowed, unreadable. "You sure this is a good idea?" I whispered. "No," he replied. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you." I didn't ask what he wanted. I already knew.
We didn't speak.
Not with words. He followed me to the garage, dim, silent, untouched since Ethan's last home improvement phase. I closed the door behind us. And he took me again. Not like before. This time it was fast. Desperate. Hands in hair. Teeth on skin. It was hunger made flesh. And I gave in completely, shamelessly. Because I'd already fallen. There was no one doing it now. After, I leaned against the cold wall, breath ragged, shirt rumpled, lips swollen. "You're playing with fire," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know." He stepped closer. "Why me?" The question struck deep. I searched his face, trying to summon an answer that didn't sound like weakness. "Because you saw me. Because you wanted me." He said nothing. He didn't need to. From that night on, it became routine. A ritual of shadows. When Ethan was gone, Derek would come. Sometimes late. Sometimes not at all. And I would wait, unsure whether I dreaded or craved the knock at the door. And every time he came, I let him in. Again. And again. We never spoke of feelings. We never spoke of a future. We just met in the silence between our lives, burned through each other, and parted without promises. But silence, like pleasure, has a cost. It was a Tuesday when the first crack appeared. Ethan came home early. I hadn't expected him until Thursday. I'd made no preparations. I hadn't hidden the laundry I'd done for Derek, hadn't erased the scent of him from my skin, hadn't locked the door to the garage, where a pair of Derek's black gym shorts still lay crumpled in the corner. Ethan noticed things. For the first time in months, maybe years, he noticed. "You wearing perfume?" he asked that night, fork halfway to his mouth. I froze. "I found an old bottle. Thought I'd use it up." He nodded, slowly. "Smells different," he added. I didn't answer. The tension stretched across the table like barbed wire. 2 days later, he confronted me. He didn't yell. Ethan didn't do anger like most men. He did distance. He did disappointment. And that, somehow, was worse. "I saw you," he said flatly. I blinked.
What?
"Last week. The garage. I had a camera installed after that break-in last year. I forgot about it until I checked the footage." I said nothing. What was there to say? "I didn't want to believe it," he went on, voice like stone. "But there you were. With him. Again. And again." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Ethan, I'm sorry." He didn't cry. He didn't even flinch. He just walked out. Not out of the house. Out of us. That night, Derek knocked. But I didn't answer. I sat in the dark, alone, trembling with the weight of what I'd destroyed. The pleasure had been real. The fire had been consuming. But the price? The price was my marriage. The price was who I used to be before I let desire win. And as much as I wanted to run to Derek, to throw myself into his arms and pretend it could be more than lust and shadow, I knew better. Because he never made promises. And I never asked for any.